Welcome to Essential Ingredients, powered by Next Gen Purpose. EI serves up thoughtful conversations with industry leaders and pioneers who support a regenerative future for our food system. The stories shared by our guests are meant to spark curiosity and inspire informed global change. Welcome to Essential Ingredients. I'm your host, Justine Reichman, and today with me is Tyler from Bluff Ranch. Welcome, Tyler.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm great. I'm excited to get to know you. I feel like we spent a couple minutes really just focused on me. And while I do like to focus on me, these podcasts really are an opportunity to share your story and get to know you. So you reached out to us and I was so honored. And I'm looking forward to just learning more about you. And, let's start. Tyler, what is Bluff Ranch?
Bluff Ranch. We are a fourth generation ranch in Northern California. We're about 2 hours north of Sacramento on I-5. So we're in the Sacramento Valley, if you know California geography. And over the years, Grandpa bought the ranch in 1960. Parents moved up here permanently in the late 70s. In the 80s, we started doing holistic resource management with Alan Savory back before he became world famous.
Wait, Tyler, before you go on though, for those people not familiar with Holistic Ranch, I'm sorry, that was a mouthful. Holistic Ranch.
Holistic resource management.
Holistic resource management.
Yep.
Can you just, for those listening, those watching, can you just talk to me a little bit about what holistic ranch management is? Resource management is?
Yeah, so it is a bit of a mouthful, and I never quite know who knows and who doesn't know. Alan Savory recently, in the past couple of years, did a TED Talk about his philosophy that's had millions of views at this point. And Alan Savory grew up in Rhodesia when it was still Rhodesia, and he was a wildlife tracker, and he loved being out in the bush, learning about his natural environment. And he was really sad when he started to see the degradation happening from conventional agriculture in his part of Rhodesia. He brought together many different philosophies, but ultimately at the core for the ranch management side of it, his central observation is that nature it's a short duration, high intensity grazing program. So think about it this way, that in your mind, you're watching My Wild America or Wild Africa, and that you see these huge herds of, let's say, wildebeest or zebra, who knows what. And they're like thousands, tens of thousands in one spot. And they're all clumped together because there's lions around them. So they got to huddle together for safety. So that means that they're going to eat right where they're at. They're going to eat out all of that grass, and they're going to manure, they're going to urinate, and they're going to fertilize. And they're like, I don't want to eat this anymore. And then they're all going to move in one big herd. So they were there for a short duration, and they were packed in really tight. So it was high density. And so this is super simplistic of all of his philosophy, but that is the way Mother Nature has sort of designed the relationship between plants, prey animals, and predator animals, where it's boom, and then they move on. So when you take that observation and you try and apply it to cows and cattle and range management and fences, for us, what we start doing is using fences instead of wolves. So when my dad went to a seminar by Alan Savory back before he was world famous, small world famous, he came back and started building fences. And so we were able to double the carrying capacity of the ranch in about 3 growing seasons. So we went from, it was small at the time. So we went from 60 head of cattle to 100, 240, 200, something like that. And rabbit trail. I love these. So the cool thing, California is a Mediterranean climate, which means that we have cool, wet winters and hot, dry summers. So that means that we have a pretty short growing season of say early March through late May, depending on the year. That's when we're growing grass. And the rest of the year, we are actually essentially metering out already grown forage. And so our job as land stewards is to have as much green leaf for as long as possible. That ultimately the only free energy that we have on this little green or pale blue dot is solar energy. The energy coming from the sun is ultimately the only energy we have. If it hits bare dirt, it bounces off. We don't get any utility out of it. Basically no utility out of it. If it hits a piece of old dead grass, it bounces off. We get very little utility out of it. But if it hits a green grass, chlorophyll, that chlorophyll is going to do its magic, and it's going to make simple sugars and the sciencey stuff I'm not super smart about, but it's going to make good stuff. Good stuff is going to happen. It's going to become food in itself. It's going to be plant for food for us humans. It's going to bring down and store energy in the soil, so it's going to become food for all the soil microbes, which is hugely fascinating and hugely important. Or it's going to be food for an animal that we're managing, which will then become food for us. So holistic management, you take that concept of herded animals trying to grow green leaves, and you put it into kind of a Western system where with fences and human management, we become the wolves, and we're moving them based on various factors. We actually take Mother Nature's operating system that works passively, and then we actively manage her system.
So how popular is this? And
I couldn't give you a percentage, but it is absolutely increasing. That there's, millions of hectares under this sort of management. So Alan Savory, over many years, he now has it's called the Savory Institute, and they have a worldwide presence. They have educators all over, 6 continents, and it's just amazing what they do. So I can't give you a percentage, but it is definitely a growing percentage of land managers, animal type people, extensive landscapes, and it just keeps growing. If the term regenerative is being thrown around a lot.
It's very popular.
Very popular. And if you wanted to take that regenerative term and figure out how to raise animals on an extensive landscape and truly call it regenerative, you're very likely going to be using a holistic management base.
Okay, so are we saying that regenerative goes hand in hand with the whole with this landscape you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, so if something is if they're doing it in a regenerative way, likely they're doing it this way.
Very, very likely. It's very hard to, I'm sure there's an example, but I can't think of one where if you are a truly regenerative animal manager, you are not using a lot of these holistic management principles. So holistic management, I've focused on probably what they would consider the least important aspect of holistic management, which is moving cows or moving livestock. Holistic management, it really has all sorts of amazing concepts. So think about your triple bottom line. Mm-hmm. So it's worried very much about the humans involved in this, they call it the context. Who's the humans involved in this environment? It's really worried about the finances. It goes through and really helps you plan your finances to make sure that you're still in business, because at the end of the day, a sustainable business that goes out of business is not sustainable. It's not sustainable. So you talk about you talk about the animals, you talk about the money, and you talk about the people, and it's really that three-legged triangle where it is trying to set up a framework of questions that leads you to a management decision that makes sure your stool is balanced so you don't fall over.
Do you feel like this running your business this way was integral to your success, both sustainably and financially?
Oh yeah. And I don't think we would be here if my dad had not crossed paths with Alan Savory. I think that our ranch it's going to sound like a lot, but in ranching acreage, we're pretty small. Our ranch is about 4,000 acres, which basically means it is a full-time job, but it is a half-time income. We can't run enough cows here to support one family, let alone 2. So right now, my parents, this is actually my sister's childhood bedroom that has become my office. My parents are out there starting on dinner. I
Mhm.
live with my wife and kids over in the original ranch homestead on the ranch. So this ranch that I just said only could produce kind of sort of a half an income is supporting two families now because of decisions that we've worked through the holistic management process and made decisions to increase our income, increase the vitality of our rangeland, and yeah, keep people happy and fun. I mean, it's fun stuff.
So I'm curious. I know that this has been a family tradition, so to speak, right? A family affair. Had you always planned in going into ranching?
So there's a good story. No, I was a huge bookworm as a kid that if you asked me what I did as a child, I would say I hid in my room and I read books. That's not really true because obviously I'm still here, but that's kind of my overall memory of being a kid. And so I went through high school. I was like, oh, I'm going to be a computer scientist, which is really funny when I look back on it. I'm like, I am so not any sort of engineer, but that was kind of my thought at the time. I ended up going to a college in LA that kind of specializes in economics and government, and I got my degree in literature. So not farming or ranching at all. But what happened is I went to college, and the very first break we had, which was probably late September, it's like all my other buddies at college were, I don't know what they're doing, but they weren't going home. And I'm like, well, okay, I'm going home. That there is something about the ranch that this is my, not to put it too woo-woo, but this is my spiritual home. This is my center. And I didn't know that until I left. I only was able to discover that by leaving. So, but as soon as I left, I came back for every single break, more and more and more. And by the time I got around to my senior year of college, there was really no question that I was coming back. I was able to apply for an internship through my college, and I was able to spend 6 weeks in Australia. My junior summer, I was working on ranches in Australia for a while with other holistic management producers. My college required a senior thesis for graduation, and I wrote my senior thesis about holistic management on the ranch and how we were using it. And then the way I tell this story, because it's a good story, even though it's not technically true, is that I graduated on a Friday and I was at a farmer's market with our grass-fed beef on a Sunday. It was probably a month later, but still, why let the truth get in the way of a good story? So anyways, the longer I was away from the ranch, the more I wanted to come back. And it was pretty much over the realistic objections of my parents that even though the ranch was puttering along, it is ranching and agriculture is not a slam dunk. It is tough to be a producer, especially because at the time we were still a cow-calf commodity producer. We were inching into this grass-fed beef, but basically we were a cow-calf operation, which meant we just raised calves up until weaning, and then we would sell them, and that was the year paycheck. We got paid once a year. And because, like I said, we were a relatively small ranch, that paycheck was pretty darn small. And my parents, mom especially, were rightfully saying, why are you coming back? How can we possibly, expand this business? And what we did was we went into direct to consumer. So like I said, farmers markets with our grass-fed beef. So we started selling Big Bluff Ranch grass-fed beef in 2000. Michael Pullen had just written an article called Power Steer, like 99, maybe 2000, somewhere right in there. And that article in the New York Times was basically the starting gun for the grass-fed beef movement. It was around, people knew about it, but he popularized it. He just lit the fuse on that piece of dynamite. And so you could really trace the entire grass-fed beef industry back to that one article. Anyways, so that's what we did. We started doing direct marketing, farmers markets. We were at markets. We started bringing other proteins. We realized that on the land side that we had an environment that was really good for goats and sheep. So we tried goats and sheep. We tried selling it. It's absolutely delicious, but there is a bit of a cultural, goat, lamb, I don't like that. Well, have you tried it? No. Try it.
Well,
Oh,
I
wait,
think it's a
this
cultural
lamb,
thing.
yeah, this
Depends
lamb and goat's
where you are.
delicious.
I
Pardon?
mean, it depends where you are. I mean, I used to
Right.
have an au pair when I was little that loved goat. She used to make curried goat all the time. So
Goat is delicious, but for us, the farmer market demographic that we were serving at the time, the expectation was that they don't eat goat or lamb. So it didn't really ever take off for us. And so, well, you guys don't know the end result yet. You don't know that what we actually do, but I'll lead you up to it one small step at a time. So we were trying to find other proteins to offer our customers, and we're like, well, what's the most popular protein? It's chicken. Let's try some chicken on pasture, which we tried, and it was successful for the animals. It was not successful for the humans. We did not enjoy that process. It was stinky, and we hand processed them in the kitchen, and not fun. So we came up with the rule: 4 legs only. Like, we're only going to raise animals that have 4 legs. And so we're like, well, the only animal left is pork. So we started doing some pasture pork, and that quickly turned into a worse debacle than our chicken experiment. That we had a pretty large population of wild pigs. So there was no way to keep a wild boar separate from a domestic sow. So we had crazy crossbreeding. We had farrowing out of season. The genetics, wild boars are just, those animals, they're meant to survive. They're jumpy. They're like, woo, woo. So not good. When we kind of finally wrapped up the pork experiment, we're like, well, that wasn't, we're like, okay, now what do we do? So we went back into poultry because other people had shown up with pork, beef. No one was still eating lamb or goat. The only thing is like chicken. Okay. So we went back into chicken. We did a much better job, and we kept growing. We got up to about 1,800 head a year processing on farm. And we reached a fork in the road where we couldn't process anymore with friends and family. So we had to make a choice. We didn't really know what we were going to do, but we knew we couldn't continue down that path anymore. I went to a conference, and I met a guy who said he could sell more than he could raise, and I could raise more than I could sell. And I was like, hey, this is actually a kind of good deal. Let me concentrate on what I'm good at, raising chickens at this point, and let you concentrate on what you're good at, marketing meat. And so that's what we did. So we started winding down our direct to consumer and started ramping up contract growing of pasture poultry. So we started that in 2009, and various twists and turns up to 2022. We've gone from 1,800 head a year to now we're processing up to 70,000 birds a year.
So thank you so much for sharing that story. It was so inspiring, and it was really interesting to hear how things took a turn and all the different twists, because I think as an entrepreneur, as a farmer, as a rancher, you got to try all these different things. And I think that many times people go out there in the world and they think they're going to get it on the first try, and that just doesn't happen. So I think you shared with us how all these years later, things change. You got to roll with them, and you're here, and it's successful.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right?
Yep. We're still here. I mean, that is the success, right? We are still here. So I'm curious, how did you make the decision now to do what you're doing? Like, you went through all these different choices, right? And you and your family, had to make a decision to take one path or another. And what path are you on today? We are on a direct to consumer path where we are selling our chicken and to direct to consumer and shipping it to their door. We are trying to create the relationship. We're trying to recreate the farmer market relationship online is what it comes down to. And
can you tell me a little bit about how you started that and some of the challenges that you're experiencing with that?
Yeah, well, we just kind of started it, really. I mean, we had to. COVID really upset our wholesale marketplace. We've always believed in direct marketing, but we were pretty well kicked off into the deep end of like, well, it's time to figure it out again. So just been noodling my way through trying to figure out how to do it well. We grow an awesome chicken. There's no doubt that we grow the best chicken you're going to find. We spent 12 years figuring that out. So the chicken's not a problem. So now I need to figure out how to sell it as well as we can grow it. So that is what I am doing now, figuring out how to market and sell our chicken.
Awesome. So you were at farmers markets. Are you still at farmers markets?
No, we haven't done it for years.
You haven't done it for years. So what's new and what's next for you now that you're doing it this way?
Well, what's new is trying to create a California meat box. So if you look at it, outside our window, we grow a specific we have a specific rainfall, specific forage pattern, and that it's different here than it is in like New York State or Florida. Why are our meat cases, why do they look the exact same? So what we are doing is creating a California specific meat box. Right now, we figured out the chicken part of it. We're really good at chicken. We know how to do lamb and goat. So that's the next thing we're going to move into. And we have some cows left over. So by next spring, you're going to be able to buy a box from Big Bluff Ranch that is grown here on Big Bluff Ranch, and you will open it up and you will see exactly what California should be growing.
So just to go back to our original conversation about regenerative and holistic farming or practices. So your chickens, your lamb, your goat, they are regenerative. And
Yep.
So what does that mean from your perspective? And I ask because I've learned that everybody's got their own definition. And I'd like to hear from you what your definition is for your farm.
Right. It is a undefined term now. So I agree. So for us, what I feel is regenerative is increasing the vitality of the landscape that I am stewarding, and that I'm going to know if I am directionally correct by the quality of the grassland we're growing. Are we increasing our native perennials? Are we increasing our effective rainfall? Are we capturing more rain that hits the ground? Is our growing season extending? Are we able to run more animals per acre for the year? So if I can go out there and I can, both on a spiritual level, feel like things are better, which you can, I can also go out there on a kind of nuts and bolts level and also be like, hey, X, Y, and Z, we've been monitoring this transect for the past 40 years, which we have, and we can say our native perennials is increased by, I don't know, pick a number, 35%. We're probably better than that, but so that's how I would define regenerative landscape management. And that this whole regenerative movement, you take care of the land, that means you're going to have healthy animals. Healthy animals are going to make healthy meat, healthy food. If you eat healthy food, almost by default, you have to be healthy. So if you really focus on making your land better, as we are humans and we are part of this landscape, that reflects back on us as well. So you get tasty food, healthy landscapes, healthy, happy animals. It's kind of tough to see where you can go wrong with it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I mean, I support regenerative agriculture, and I try to learn as much about it as I can. And I know that many people do have questions about the intersection of regenerative agriculture, organic, grass-fed, and how these things all play together. Could you talk to that a little bit?
So organic, you're right. They all are in roughly the same constellation of concepts, but they are all different, and they don't necessarily are not all exclusive, and they're all not mutually inclusive. So grass-fed beef, you could conceivably do grass-fed beef. That is not regenerative.
Right.
That is a possibility. But in general, grass-fed beef will be regenerative because grass is a resource that you need. and you want to take care of your grass. If you take care of your grass, you're pretty much regenerative. So grass-fed, while not directly regenerative, probably is. Organic, there are so many requirements on what to be as far as organic. You're not using herbicides, you're not using pesticides. If you're on the animal side, there are some welfare considerations, but nowhere in there in the organic standards are they actually asking you to prove that your landscape is improving, is actually regenerating. That being said, if you are a regenerative farmer, almost by default, you have to be organic because you can't really use herbicides and pesticides while trying to improve your landscape. They are a tool. You might use them sporadically in very specific use cases, but you're not just going to go out and spray everything. You're not going to grow food through chemistry. So regenerative really is a overarching concept right now. There are some standards out there. Probably the most notable is something called land to market, which is actually something designed and stewarded by the Savory Institute. That is very, very good about regenerative. There are some other standards coming up. So there's not like a boom, boom, boom answer to that, or a question to that answer.
And it's very challenging and it's very complex. And I think there's a lot of different answers. My goal is really to break it down as, simply as possible so that we can at least give people an opportunity or a chance to try to understand it as best we can.
Right.
And that's all we can do. So and I appreciate you taking the time to break it down as simply as possible, because I know that it's complicated. And I know that these things do intersect, but not always. They're not mutually exclusive, but they do interconnect at times. So thank you for breaking that down, both for me and for the people listening and watching.
Right. I would say that to not get tied up too much into labels, specific labels, that for me as a small scale chicken producer, as a small scale beef producer, that one person buying from me is significant, that it keeps us in business. We are doing good by the land. And that your purchase, while maybe feeling insignificant to you, is very significant to me. So don't get hung up on the perfect label or the perfect product. Just do the best you can. If you can only buy organics every now and then, great. You've kept someone organic farmer in business. If you're worried that it's, organics coming from China, yeah, you're probably right to have some concerns, maybe, but it's probably a lot better than non-organic coming from China, right? So you've made a directionally good choice. And I think that is just very important for people to understand that taking one small step, well, maybe small for you, is significant to me. And that the more small steps you take, the more impact you have on the future, because you choose the future we want to live in 3 times a day. Every time you eat, the food choices you make have a very direct impact on the landscape, which is what we all rely on. So don't get hung up on about it, but just do one better thing.
Well, I think it's also many times, people, including myself, don't know if it's better to eat locally, organic. I mean, there's lots of questions about this. And I think there's no one right answer, to be honest. I think you got to do what's right for yourself.
Yep.
So I think that, you may choose to eat an organic. Some things may be more important to you to eat organic, and some things may be more important to eat locally. And that's just a choice people make.
Right. I hope I didn't imply that they needed to go organic, but yes.
No, you did not at all. I'm just making an additional point that I think that people just need to do what they need to do for themselves. You are just saying for the planet or for this or for that. I'm just saying in general, I think that, we can't, you're saying it doesn't, people can just they don't have to do it. They don't have to do everything. We don't have to. We can't all do everything. And I'm just saying, further than that, people may not know what is better. And, they may struggle with that in addition. Because I've gone to the grocery store saying, do I get this local or do I get it organic? If it's organic and it's coming from Mexico, is it better than buying something organic? And then there's that whole struggle between buying what is grown seasonally and locally. And that's a whole nother conversation.
So, like I said,
I don't want to go off on a tangent.
Yeah, just do the best you can. Yep.
You just try to do the best you can. So, but I did, before we wrap up, I did want to just ask, selfishly for me, but also for the rest of the people that are listening and for viewing, how can they order a box, or how do they order chicken online?
Yeah.
Because after all, they've just heard all about your journey and they've heard all about your chickens, and we know you grow really good chicken. So how do we get your chicken?
BigBluffRanch.com. Boom. You're going to show up, land on our homepage. There's going to be a shop now button in the middle of it. You go to the website or you go to the shop and boom, all of our amazing chickens there, and we'll ship it to wherever you're at on the West Coast.
Okay. And so if our viewers and our listeners stayed for the whole podcast and listened to all of our stories and all of our conversations, is there anything special we can offer them?
So, yeah, go to bigbluffranch.com and go shop now. We have our products up there on the website. We are a small operation, even though that was a big number of chickens. We are micro, nano particle size in the chicken world. We can't keep everything on stock on the website. So if you want to see all of the yummy, random, but delicious chicken stuff we have, get on our newsletter. I send a newsletter out a couple times a week, and that is where all the people in the know get all the amazing, awesome deals that I come across.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me and for being participating in this podcast and videocast. And I want to thank our guests for joining in. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and on YouTube. If you like what you see, don't forget to leave us a note. If you have any questions, leave them there, and share it with your friends. See you again next week. To learn more about these episodes and access show notes, go to nextgenpurpose.com and choose podcast. If you like this episode, head to Apple Podcasts or your favorite platform to subscribe and leave us a review. Visit the Next Gen Purpose YouTube channel to subscribe to our EI videocast and give this episode a like while you're there. Follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn at Next Gen Purpose, and connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram at Justine_Reichman. Thanks for joining us.